Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. And today we're going to be talking about Indiana Jones 5 and the fact that James Mangold, the director of Ford V Ferrari, Logan, The Wolverine, Walk the Line, a bunch of really good movies, has been contracted to come on and direct the film. Steven Spielberg will be producing, and this will be the first indie film that will not have Spielberg in the directing chair. Now, there's a lot to digest with this. Now, we did have confirmation a little while ago that Indiana Jones 5 was going into production, or going into the first stages of pre-production, and they were looking to get people on board. They had already gotten Harrison Ford, I guess, to come back for to play Indy again, and they were really just searching for, the crew and the supporting actors to come in. So they've gotten to that point now. Coronavirus derailed it a little bit. It's set to, I believe the release date for it is sometime in July of 2022 as of right now. But we have confirmation that Mangold will be the director of the film, which is very interesting to me as a choice for Disney, because again, Disney, a lot of the time, at least in the past, they've shown that they're willing to kind of give younger, inexperienced directors control over various projects, although they've it's been a tomato-tomato kind of thing in certain ways. They hired J.J. Abrams and they hire Colin Trevorrow, who have big experience, but then they hire Rian Johnson as well, who has very little experience on the upper echelon of, budgeted films. But you could also look at stuff like, Lord and Miller and Gareth Edwards. Gareth Edwards was a little bit of a less of a chance there because he had just come off of Godzilla in 2014 when they were doing Rogue One. But really, outside of that, then you go over to the Marvel side of things, and again, they're giving most of those more recent movies to a lot of younger, inexperienced directors. So it's odd that they're hiring on Mangold. They also hired on Sam Raimi about 2 or 3 weeks ago for, or maybe a little longer than that, for Doctor Strange 2, which I applaud. I think that's probably a good choice for somebody to helm that movie. The only issue I see is that, the studio interference might cause him to leave. Now, here's the other thing, too, is that Mangold, we obviously know that he has superhero experience. He has experience with larger budgeted films. He has experience with good films. His movies have won a total of 4 Oscars: 2 for Ford v Ferrari, 1 for Walk the Line, and 1 for, I believe, Girl Interrupted. Now, those can't all be directly attributed to him personally because some of those were spread out among the actors and actresses, but there were films that he did. He makes good quality films. And like I said, I've gone over Logan. I love Logan. I love The Wolverine. The stuff that he's done in the superhero genre, I think, is very good. So seeing him kind of come back into that kind of an adventure sort of world, maybe not a superhero world, but an adventure-y type of world, is interesting to me. But there's a couple problems with going forward like this. Now, the first one, and it's the most obvious one, is tone. Now, all 4 of the original films were written by George Lucas, and they were directed by Steven Spielberg. Now, the first 3, well, all of them really, are kind of based off of George Lucas's love of kind of the old adventure serial, stuff like The Phantom and things like that. Older stuff like that, that you could kind of take and you could turn into something like Indiana Jones. And it was exaggerated, but not exaggerated to the point where it was corny, I guess you could say. There are moments in, especially that original trilogy of films, that are very, very, very violent, including a guy getting ground up in an aircraft blade. Even though they were kind of adventure serials, they were still, again, very graphic, even for the time, in some respects. So you had that sort of balance of, something that could apply for adults and something that could apply for kids, and it worked very well. Again, a lot like Star Wars in a certain way. It felt a lot like that. But the other thing is that you had Spielberg coming in, and Spielberg taking the producer's chair I don't think it necessarily demeans his presence, but it's not going to be a Steven Spielberg film like the first 4 movies were. And it's not going to have that Steven Spielberg type of tone. And for those people that have seen a lot of Spielberg films, you kind of know what I mean by that. It's kind of that semi-serious, you kind of wink, wink, nudge, nudge type of tone where there's just the right amount of humor sprinkled into the script, and then the rest of it is just kind of fun action. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about Steven Spielberg's adventure movies. Obviously, I don't count that when I count, stuff like, Schindler's List. But the point is that you're going to be lacking that thing that Spielberg can do that he can put into his movies, unless James Mangold is going to emulate that. But I don't think that that's really going to be the case, at least not all that much, unless he gets pressure from up above. Now, the other thing is we do know that Mangold had been tapped by Lucasfilm before, because he was originally going to actually do a Boba Fett film after all the stuff happened with Josh Trank. And that was right before Solo came out and bombed. So then after that, the Boba Fett project at the time was canceled, along with a few other things, and Mangold was basically kind of detached from the project. He wasn't attached to it for very long, at least publicly. I think it might have only been like the course of maybe a couple of months, but then that project kind of got dropped. So I would assume that maybe they shifted his contract over, and this is him fulfilling his contract to Lucasfilm as directing this next film. But like I said, you're missing the Steven Spielberg directing, which I think is the main part of it. I'm not really too concerned about the writing because you can probably write as well as George Lucas can. But the Steven Spielberg directing, I think, is going to be the real kind of issue with this movie in terms of the way it looks and the way it feels. Because the thing is, if people go into a theater and again, I'm not saying that Indiana Jones 5 is going to succeed at all. I personally think it's going to fail no matter what they do. But if you're going to go about this from a constructive point of view, if you're going to have people going into the theater, you're going to assume that those people are fans of your franchise to begin with. So if that's the case, and they're going in and they're seeing a movie that, the opening cinematic looks more like the beginning of Saving Private Ryan rather than an Indiana Jones film, then that's kind of a bad reference to make because it did take place in World War II with the originals, and he was fighting Nazis. But regardless of that, it's taking that kind of fun sort of adventure-y tone with a little bit of suspense and stuff like that, and kind of the film noir angle a little bit. And taking that type of an adventurous tone and taking it and making it a little bit too real for the audience. And when I say that, Indiana Jones, it never feels like it's real in terms of, obviously the stuff happening on screen. Most of it is fantastical anyway, or at least the stuff that they're looking for, the artifacts and things that they have in those films. But the characters themselves feel a little bit cartoonish, not to the point where they're unrelatable, but to the point where this might not be your suspension of disbelief is kind of it's there and you have to have it. If you lose the suspension of disbelief, then it just becomes corny and hokey. But I think the original films pushed that to a limit where I think it was just cornbally enough to be funny, but not enough to take away from the films. And again, I can attribute more of that, I guess, to Spielberg maybe than to Lucas, because I'm sure that Spielberg definitely altered those scripts a little bit when he was doing those movies. And since he was friends with Lucas just kind of let him do it, as opposed to, we've heard him having clashes with directors before, like Irvin Kershner on Empire Strikes Back. But, like I said, you're going to be missing that tone. The other major problem that you have with this is James Mangold going to go along with Lucasfilm? Because we haven't seen Lucasfilm under Disney so far make an Indiana Jones film. We've seen them make advances towards one, but this is the first time we've actually seen them actually, go through and actually start a production process to make this film. And if Kathleen Kennedy has her hands in this as much as she has in the Star Wars films, then I would say this thing might be dead in the water even before seeing stuff about it, or at least a good likelihood that it might be. Just because James Mangold, I don't think, is going to do that. He's, again, like Sam Raimi, he is a veteran director. He has been around in Hollywood for a long time. He's directed a lot of really good movies. And again, it's only been getting better and better lately. So he's somebody that not only, I'm sure, is he demanding a very high price tag from Disney in order to do this film, but I think that him doing it, he's going to do it his way. And if he can't, he's going to tell you to go screw yourself and walk away, because the thing is, he's at the point in his career in Hollywood where he can say F you to Disney and he can go to pretty much any studio in Hollywood and get 5 to 10 offers from them to do movies. It's just a project that he wants. He just has to find a project that he wants to do. But again, therein lies the problem: is that this is a guy who doesn't need the money and the exposure. He's not like a Ryan Johnson who jumped from a couple indie films and directing TV episodes to directing a Star Wars movie. This is somebody who's directed Academy Award winning films. So he doesn't need the attention and then the spotlight on him. He already has that, especially last year with Ford V Ferrari, which is one of the most popular films that was on the docket last year for the Oscar, or this past year for the Oscars. He made that film and got a lot of publicity for it, and his name was on the tip of everybody's tongue before, during, and after the Oscars. So it would not doubt me if he has another 10 offers on the table right now and he could say screw you to them. The only reason why he's probably doing it is because it seems like something that's interesting to him, or maybe he likes the challenging idea of it, or it could also have something to do with the amount of money that Disney is paying him. But like I said, he's at a point where he could technically refuse it if he wanted to, if they try to levy it down too hard on him to make certain creative choices. So I would be very curious to see how long he actually remains attached to this project. Like I said, they probably had him in mind for a while because of the Boba Fett involvement. So I'm assuming he was on their short list of guys they wanted to get. So I'd imagine they would at least assume that maybe he shares somewhat of a similar view of the project as they do. And again, since he's going to be working directly with Spielberg, even though he's a veteran director, Steven Spielberg is still Steven fucking Spielberg, so you should probably listen to him. Unless this turns into a Tim Miller, James Cameron, Terminator Dark Fate type of situation where those two are having creative battles day in and day out about how the movie should work, which I think is something else that could possibly happen too, which is a big bad thing to have if you have a producer like Steven Spielberg who's done all of the Indiana Jones films, and then James Mangold basically says, like, get the fuck off my movie set. That's something that could legitimately happen, which is another bad thing that could come attached to this when the production actually starts. So, and I'm not even going into the whole thing with the fact that, Harrison Ford is going to be 110 and still doing Indiana Jones movies. But, the point is that this carries a lot of weight with it, but at the same time there is an amount of stability in it, which is curious to me, again, coming from Disney, where you have two very high-profile hires for directing major tentpole films of theirs within 2.5, 3 months of each other. So, but I want to know what you think. Are you excited that James Mangold is going to get the chance to come in and do an Indiana Jones movie? Are you excited for Indiana Jones 5? Are you like me and you kind of think it's probably going to flop and suck, just kind of like the Crystal Skull did? Put your thoughts in the comments below. As usual, I like to read them. Hit the bell for notifications, hit the like button, subscribe, and remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?